I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this meeting. My work is about Jewish health workers during World War II in Yugoslavia. The theme is very extensive, not fully explored, so I will try to briefly introduce it to you. I'm sorry for my English, but imagine there is something worse. My accent. Here you can see some information about the war in Yugoslavia. About 70,000 Jews were died during the Second World War in Yugoslavia. According to available information, the total number of killed Jewish health workers in Yugoslavia during the Second World War is 1,137. This is not the final number, but so far determined. Of this, 932 people were victims of fascist terror, and 205 people were killed in the Liberation War. It is estimated that before the Second World War, there were about 2,000 Jewish health workers in Yugoslavia. On the map, you can see how the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was divided during the Second World War among the occupiers and Quislings. You can also see how many Jewish health workers were killed per occupied territory. On the territory of the independent state of Croatia, 359 people were killed. Serbia, 229. Bačka, Baranja, and Međimurje, 224. Banat, 81. Macedonia, 35. Kosovo and Metohija, 3, and Dalmatia, Croatian Coast, and Iceland's 1. Here you can see gender structure of the victims and the number of the victims according to the year of death. Of the 932 people victims of fascist terror, 767 were men and 165 women. During the year 1941, 421 people were killed. 1942, 206. 1943, 72. 1944, 197. And 1945, 8 people. For 28 people is unknown year of suffering. A number of people were saved thanks to the mixed marriages by accessing the partisan movement, and a number of them returned after the war from concentration camps. Among the 932 health workers who were killed, there was a total of 435 doctors. For the research, I used a list of killed Jews who were health workers during the Second World War in Yugoslavia, which contains full details of 930 people, and that list was made by Dr. Jaša Romano, a colonel of Yugoslav army. I did the research only about the Jewish health workers that were victims of fascist terror. And tomorrow, my colleague, Bishop of Serbian Orthodox Church, Mr. Jovan Čulibrk, will say something about the Jewish health workers that were in the partisan movement. The list showed us that the greatest number of people were killed by German soldiers and members of the Ustasha movement. And that spread everywhere. Jewish health workers have died from the disease while trying to escape in forced labor, in concentration camps, were executed at the execution sites, and some persons have committed suicide. Several persons lost their lives in the bombing of Banja Luka and Belgrade. One person was died on his return from captivity in 1945, and one person got killed by heart attack before the evacuation of the camp. How much is lost humanity in the war, and the data showed that seriously ill patients were killed. So the German soldiers were took from the hospital in Belgrade, nervous patients who were later killed. A similar case happened in Zagreb, and responsible for this crime were members of the Ustaša movement. From the list is evident that some persons try to find salvation by escaping abroad. There is data that the persons running away to Sofia, Budapest, Thessaloniki and Italy, but unsuccessfully, because they were captured and killed. Besides escaping abroad, certain number of individuals trying to find a salvation escaping to other places on the territory of Yugoslavia. Several persons during the occupation fled to Macedonia, but the Gestapo returned them to Belgrade and killed. Jewish health workers unsuccessfully fled into interior Serbia, but also in the towns in the independent state of Croatia, tried to hide from members of the Ustaša movement. Among those killed, a small number of persons were members of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia and the Union of Communist Youth of Yugoslavia. There were a few officers of the Yugoslav army who were taken into captivity and killed there, but some officers have been killed in Yugoslavia. A significant part of the victims was born abroad, and a significant portion of they attended a school abroad. In early May 1941 was founded in Belgrade a special medical service for the Jews led by the Jews, Jewish Health Service. By establishing this service, Nazi aim was to acquire the impression that they are taking care of the Jews' health, and that delusion turned Jews from escape from Belgrade. Medical ethics is obliged to doctors to stay next to their patients. She also had a human role because it has helped sick Jews. On the other hand, a number of Jews escaped from Belgrade based on false medical certificates issued by the Jewish Health Service, which were released of forced labor and daily reporting to the German authorities. The district health department and within the Jewish Health Service have been lifted at the end of 1941, while the Jewish hospital was abolished 19 March 1942, when the Gestapo came with mobile gas chambers and about 700 to 800 patients were stifled. Doctors of this hospital killed during the night of 18-19 March 1942. Unlike the occupied Serbia, where the executions were carried out by the German soldiers, in the independent state of Croatia is the largest number of Jews killed by members of the Ustaša movement. A large number of Jewish medical workers were taken to the Ustaša camps and killed. A special role in the removal of Jewish and Serbian doctors and their deportation to the camps had pro-Ustaša-minded doctors in Croatia and Slavonia. These pro-Ustaša doctors had two motives: to get rid of competition and in order to get their contemporary practices.
Can you explain who the Ustaša were?
The right wing, extreme right wing in the independent state of Croatia.
And to put it simply, those were the Nazis of Croatia.
Thank you. A certain number of doctors from the Croatia and Slavonia was sent to Bosnia in August and October 1941 to work on combating endemic syphilis. The idea of action for combating endemic syphilis occurred in May 1941, when not made a decision yet on raising national uprising in Yugoslavia. However, it is not true, some historians claim, how they would preserve as many doctors for the needs of national liberation war. The question is whether they knew in May 1941 that the independent state of Croatia exterminated the Jews, but the not-standing argument that the aim of sending them to Bosnia was that save lives to them. Correct is the claim that they were sent to Bosnia because of insistence of pro-Ustaša doctors to remove them from the Croatia and Slavonia. Most of these doctors was approached the partisan movement after and so managed to rescue. On this slide, you can see some information about action. Although a number of doctors who were sent to Bosnia on combating endemic syphilis have become ill and some died, action had a positive side because most of them avoid deportation to concentration camps and later joined the partisan movement. An interesting case is called Osijek affair. Osijek was a city at the territory of the independent state of Croatia. During 1942 in Osijek, from about 40 Jewish doctors who lived there before the war, remained only 4. Pro-Ustasha doctors initiated campaign against them who could be taken to the camps. Sent a petition with the names of 18 pro-Ustasha doctors, so they were taken to the camps and in the interest of the racial purity of the health service. Because of the huge popularity enjoyed by the people, it was decided that one of those doctors sent to the camp where they were Serbian children in Sisak and one other sent to the shelter for the Serbian children in Jastrebarsko. The other 2 were taken in Auschwitz and murdered there. Doing this research, I have identified 3 of the largest kill sites of Jewish health workers. Jasenovac camp, which was located on the territory of so-called independent state of Croatia, Banjica camp, which was located on the territory of Serbia, and Camp Auschwitz. Speaking about Camp Auschwitz, the results showed that the largest number of people have died in the course of 1944. This is not surprising, taking into the account that the largest number of people of Jewish origin from Yugoslavia were sent to Auschwitz during 1944. It is believed that in Auschwitz about 20,000 Jews from Yugoslavia have been killed. According to the database of the Museum of Genocide Victims, the total number of Jewish people killed in Auschwitz is about 9,500. Of these, around 5,600 people were killed in 1944. According to current data, it is assumed that during May and June of 1944, about 12,000 Jews from Bačka were transported to Auschwitz. The largest concentration camp for the extermination of people on the territory of Yugoslavia was the Jasenovac camp. Jasenovac consisted of a complex of several camps that were set up in the independent state of Croatia. Jasenovac was located about 100 kilometers from Zagreb. Jews were transported to Jasenovac from all parts of Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. The largest number were killed immediately on arrival on the camp, and those who were left alive were mostly artisans or highly educated, whose knowledge Ustashas used. Physicians, dentists, goldsmiths, shoemakers, etc. worked in the workshop and factories in Jasenovac. According to the database of the Museum of Genocide Victims in Belgrade, in the Jasenovac camp, around 20,000 people of Jewish origin were killed, while about 30,000 people of Jewish origin born on the territory of the independent state of Croatia perished in World War II. Also, 198 Jewish Yugoslav health workers perished in the Ustasha concentration camp Jasenovac, or in other words, about 1% of all Jewish victims in this camp were health workers. The third major kill site of Jewish Yugoslav health workers was a Nazi concentration camp in Nazi-occupied Serbia, Banjica. According to the results of our study, 139 Jewish Yugoslav health workers were killed in the camp in Banjica. Also, the largest number of people got killed in the first 2 years of the war, when the Jewish question was resolved in the territory of occupied Serbia. On this slide, you can see some information for other camps and killing sites. Analyzed list indicates that the Jewish health workers were taken as forced labor. A number of people have been sent to forced labor in Hungary and Ukraine and died there. According to data provided by the Jascha Romano, about 4,000 Jews from the territory of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia were sent to forced labor. About 1,500 in Ukraine, about 2,000 in Hungary, and about 500 in the mine in Bor in Serbia. Most of them didn't come back alive. In our study, we particularly addressed the phenomenon of suicide, which a number of Jewish doctors and other medical staff carried out after the arrival of the Ustasha to power in the independent state of Croatia, but also in other parts of Yugoslavia, as well as those who committed suicide before the taking or during transport the camp. According to our research, 19 Jewish Yugoslav health workers choose self-destruction, or about 2% of those analyzed from the list. On this slide, you can see some information about the suicide. I will accelerate this little talk, so I am going to the next slide. Questioning the motives of these suicides would be superfluous. We are not talking about the classical suicidality, which occurs because the patient is not treated. We are talking about the forced suicide, which happened because the circumstances in which a man is placed. Among the 19 Yugoslav Jewish medical workers who committed suicide, 13 were males and 6 were females. For the death of 9 people who were committed suicide, either directly or indirectly, the members of the Ustasha movement are responsible, and for the death of 10 people, Nazis are responsible. More than a half of them committed suicide before the taking or on the way to the camp, which tell us that they were aware of the fate that was waiting for them. Nearly 1/3, 6 persons, committed suicide during the taking or on the way to Auschwitz in 1944. On the other hand, 4 persons committed suicide before being taken to the Ustasha camp. How big was the terror and repression of members of the Ustasha regime becomes evident with the suicide of Milic couple. On this slide, you can see some information about it. We don't have time for this slide. Okay, have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to conclude. The analyzed list of Jewish health workers victims of fascist terror during the Second World War in Yugoslavia showed us that the German soldiers and members of the Ustasha movement are responsible for the largest number of casualties. The results showed us that about 80% of those killed perished in the camps and the killing fields. In the camps Jasenovac 198, Auschwitz 193, and Banjica 939, a total of 530 people perished, or 57% of the total number of Jewish Yugoslav health workers, victims of fascist terror. If we add to the count camps Sajmište or Fairground, where 55 people got killed, Jabuka, where 59 of them got executed, the camp Treblinka, which wiped 39 lives, and another 28 persons who were killed by Hungarian fascists during the so-called Novi Sad raid. This percentage is 77%, or 711 victims. Thank you.